Hello, welcome to Truth Talks with Charlie. Hello, hello, hello. So excited to be here. We are talking about exploring the conscious depth of the vessel. Hey, hey, hey. Hey. I'm gonna add you on, Eddie, 'cause let's go. Good evening. Hello, good evening.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hello. I feel like
My love of Nakin for all of my fellow indigenous Maya descendants. How are you?
good evening. OMG. I'm too excited about this conversation. So I'm gonna try to simmer. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, I can hear you well. Hello, good evening. Good evening, everyone. So this is Truth Talks with Charlie, and Truth Talks with Charlie is all about exploratory conversations. What we do here is just stay curious about the conversation. So each guest that comes on basically has a theme or like something, some area of their life that they're open to talk about. And basically, what I do is ask questions, get curious, stay curious, and just follow along. This is not about right or wrong. This is just an example of what's possible for each of us. Each individual, I believe, is just a representation of what's possible. So the sky isn't even a limit in this world, but let's just go with it. All right. So today we are talking with Eddie Bravo, who is a licensed master social worker, and I'm gonna let him introduce himself. Because around here, this is your truth.
Thank you so much, Charlie, for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you and everyone who has joined. Thank you for investing your energy and your essence into this space. It's not just our space, right? It's yours as well. Um, I am a licensed holistic psychotherapist. I'm also an entrepreneur. I founded my private practice straight out of grad school, which goes by Roots and Bones Holistic Healing, LLC. Along with my entrepreneurship and my spiritually infused psychotherapy approach, I also am a co-founder and the co-chair of Social Workers Honoring Education within Anti-Racist Learning Standards at my alma mater, Lehman College. Um, and I'm also a multiracial, indigenous, Maya descendant, bone reader, witch, whatever you want to call it. In Maya, we call it Balam, which is like Jaguar High Priest. So I'm here today to get into these roots and bones of this conversation. So excited.
Yes, I am so excited. Okay, thank you for the introduction. So before I get started, I like to tell people like why I invited the guests. So for the month of July, for those who don't know, Truth Talks is just like a new series because I love hearing people's stories, and I think that who we express as has a lot to do with our history and what we learned along the way, what we unlearned along the way, and I think it's such an interesting thing to talk about. So I met Eddie while I was in grad school. I was also in social work grad school. I was at a different school, but we were at the same internship. And something about Eddie that really stood out to me was how confident he was, right? And how passionate he was about what he was saying. And also was a witch, right? And like something like, and we were having open dialogues about this during our internship. And that said a lot to me. And I'm just curious about people. And Eddie has always just been so out there with his truth, and I always just appreciate it. I loved it. And he also triggers me in a good way, right? Like to be in my truth, because like you call out my inner child every
Mm.
time, and it never misses, right? And so even when I asked you to join, I was nervous and scared, and that's what I loved about it because I was like, Eddie energy gets to your inner child, and I'm like, let's go, okay? So it's like it was just so many reasons why I just respected you, I adored you, I'm in awe of you. And so like having this conversation, I know anytime we talk, I feel like I'm getting a healing session.
Mm.
So we're gonna thank you in advance. And I really, really do want to encourage people to be active in the chat, to ask
Mhm.
questions, to get involved. There's just so many different perspectives that can come from this conversation because of the topics we're going to be talking about. We all can relate to them. They're not like only unique for any of us. So let's get this conversation started. Oh, wait, before we start, we have to do your ice-breaking question.
Okay, ice-breaking question. Let's do
Okay,
it.
so this is it. It hurt me to do this because I don't like to limit people, but it happens. Would you rather speak all languages or be able to talk with animals?
I would rather be able to talk with all animals. And the reason why is because language is something that is so vast. And one language in which we continue to ignore is the language of Mother Earth. And who else speaks for Mother Earth than the animals who inhabit these ecosystems that are collapsing literally all around us? And when I think about the problem of anthropocentrism, which is the idea and ideology that the earth is only meant for human consumption, I would speak to all animals because animals are the first ones to know when something is about to go down.
Yeah, I thought about animals today too. I was like, what if we were raised in a way where dogs and cats just roam the street regularly, right? Like, what if we were raised that way, right? Where it's not a fear thing, but we know how to live in harmony in a way that, you know, life would just be different if it was a norm for animals just to be free, right? And they wouldn't be home animals. So I was thinking about that earlier today for whatever reason. I was like, the world would just be different. But here we are. Okay, we got some all languages in the chat. Yeah, I don't know. I already feel like animals try to talk to me, so I'll be like, ah. You know, my favorite trees and cats usually are the two, but different topic. All right, so we're going to get started with this conversation. Let's settle in. Okay, so to start, the idea of the conscious death of the vessel, what does that mean to or for you?
So the conscious death of the vessel was something that came to me in a vision while I was meditating. And it was part of my nightly ritual, which is where I take one of my sound bowls, depending on like what chakra I feel I need to open up. And I will sit with that right there in between my lap and I'll play it. And as I play it, I'm chanting, I'm connecting. And what I realized in this moment, and I was working with the root chakra that night. And the root chakra, for those who don't know, it represents safety. It represents your foundation. It represents everything that supports everything else in our body energetically, right? It's our purpose. It's how we're grounded in the world. And as I was meditating, I realized at a deeper level that death and life are coexisting at the exact same time within my vessel, biologically. And then I started expanding that deeper and saying, collectively as a society, globally, we are experiencing a collective trauma of death because of COVID. And then I started getting deeper. And I realized not only how are we experiencing a collective trauma of death because of a pandemic, we're experiencing a collective trauma and mass exodus outside of a capitalist system because of COVID. And then I started going deeper. Not only are we experiencing that, we're experiencing the conscious death of our planet, of our governments, of our systems, of our ideas. And so as I started sitting with that and connecting these dots, I realized, why is it that so many people throughout COVID have started businesses, have started living in their true purpose for joy? And why are we having such a difficult time? Well, rather, not us. Why are governments and economic systems having difficult times bringing people back into the systems of chattel slavery that is coming in the form of debt, right? And producing and capitalism. And that is because we have consciously understood that with all of this death happening around our physical vessels, that life needs to be lived at a far deeper level than going to work, being stressed out, and going home.
So when you are talking about the vessel, we're not just talking about your body.
Correct. We're talking about everything that we inhabit. Our vessel is, yes, our physical body, right? On top of that, if you're watching this, if you're in your home, that is another vessel. It holds our belongings. It holds our memories. And even that is temporary. A fire, a flood, a hurricane, a tornado could wipe that out like this. At a deeper purpose, the community that we live in is a vessel. Displacement and gentrification is killing off our communities, our vessels that make us feel safe. Our countries are collapsing. That's another vessel. Our states are collapsing. Our planet is collapsing. Everything in which that holds us and encompasses us to feel somewhat safe is temporary. Even the sun that charges us, we know scientifically will eventually burn out.
Yeah, but that's the thing about life, at least my belief, right, is that almost everything, or I would say everything, is temporary here. Everything we create, whether it be the rules, that's why the whole idea of like laws and policies make me giggle when people say we can't. You can change the words on your paper. You can. You can. You don't want to, and I think that's a different conversation. Yeah, because I think that even as we're talking about the depth of these different vessels, and even going into further, like you and I had talked before about having this conversation, and a lot of different topics came up. And yesterday I went further with a friend, and I ended up mentioning the privilege and the freedom thing. And I wanted to talk about that as it contains to the whole idea of depth too, because even as we're talking about, you know, liberation, we're talking about depth there too, right?
Absolutely.
Of a lot of different things.
Absolutely. And when we think about consciousness, when it comes to liberation movements, when it comes to any kind of freeing of our spirits, of our bodies, I think that the thing that a lot of us struggle with is incongruence. So many people are not really awake, they're narcoleptic. They're only awake when it benefits them and when it fits a certain narrative. But if you cannot place that narrative in the reverse and it does not benefit others, there's a problem. There's a discrepancy. I see this a lot, and particularly as an Indigenous person, when it comes to a lot of the land back things that are happening for Black Americans, which is a beautiful thing. At the same time, it's still stolen land.
Yeah.
So whose land are you actually taking?
Yeah.
It's complex.
Yeah, but there's layers to this, though. And that's the thing that I feel like these conversations have, right? Because all of us are passionate about something, right? Whatever that something is. And to me, my something is so important, right? And to you, your something is so important. So even if we were to have a conversation, right? Like I told you, right? Like I don't be knowing everything that's going on. I might know a little bit about a lot of things, but I don't know everything because I'm just not that passionate about everything. And I do tend to focus on what I'm passionate about, right? And when we start talking about like land and who owns what, and right, and like giving it back in the history, right? I don't trust humans. So me even listening to history is rough, right? Because these are, again, right, things are that are being handed down from generation to generation, maybe, or things you're just reading in books that someone else wrote. So I know that you have a vast of information. So like, when we're talking about the land that is the give back land and stuff like that, like when you talk about that, what exactly, can you tell us a little bit about what you're referring to?
Yeah, so when we look at like Indigenous and Native people talking about land back movement, it is about literally giving the land back. So many people talk about decolonizing work, and they use this term so incorrectly because to decolonize is not to just remove colonial ideology. To truly decolonize is to give back the land that was taken from the original inhabitants here. And a lot of people, when we talk about liberation movements, they never want to examine their proximity to settler colonialism. And that's a problem. Because at the end of the day, unless you are a Native American, North, Central, South, you are a trespasser. And while history is complex, we know that with the transatlantic slave trade, all of these things have created a whole lot of problems. That's a reality. That's something that we know. At the same time, the true inhabitants of this land don't even have sovereignty. The Supreme Court is literally looking at a ruling that will remove Indigenous people's rights to sovereignty on their own land today. So for many years, Indigenous people on their own land, or we would call them reservations, had their own institutions, their own policing systems, their own certain kinds of laws when it came to adoption and childcare and all of these things, right? And so with this laws that were passed then now being challenged today, it's basically saying that you will not have that anymore.
Yeah.
The government will now federally police and rule you and continue to implement a deeper set of colonial violence onto people who are the natural inhabitants here.
Mm-hmm. But that's that. We already know how I feel about the law, so I'm not going to go into that here, right? And the idea of like the bullying and the using, saying like I'm fighting for this, but then using your same tools against you, right? Like we do. It's like this cycle. So when you talk about, so one of the things that Eddie and I talked about when we talked about liberation and privilege, we were kind of discussing like, because I was really shocked when you use that term, because it was like, that does make sense, right? Because I think a lot of times what people are talking about is privilege, right? They want equal, I want to be treated the way you're being treated, right? Like, and to me, that's not necessarily freedom, right? That's just you giving me permission to have some experience or something like that.
Right.
So like that's how, when I heard you say that, that's what I heard, right? Like that's how I interpret that. And do you have another interpretation for that?
I mean, in the way that I think about liberation movements, I think that for a lot of us, our liberation, which is valid, is coming from a place of rage and anger. We know that these two emotions teach us great things about ourselves. I think the issue is that so many of us have gotten so lost in our rage and anger that the way that we see liberation is dehumanizing somebody else so that we can wield the same power as they do. Audre Lorde, in many of her books, speaks about, in order for us to liberate, we have to eradicate and dismantle the systems that are already in place, that we then are just able to benefit and wield against other people. So we're not really liberating, we're just changing the guards. And I see in the comments, like, someone asking, are refugees welcomed by indigenous people? Even this question promotes some kind of lateral violence. Why? Because you in that point are expecting me to speak for all indigenous people. You are expecting me to offer some kind of ideology to exist within your colonial system, which has been projected onto us here. Because as a teaching point right now in this teachable moment, we need to also remember that prior to colonialism and coming on these shores, we didn't have borders. Indigenous people moved with seasons. We had outposts, but we moved freely. So to even ask this question is to project your ideology of borders, which is something that we didn't even have.
Oh, I get it. I was like, wait, okay.
And I see another thing here, which is important, right? Privilege is divisive, but liberation is unifying.
Yeah. That's why I wanted to talk about it, because I feel like, right, because even when you said it to me, I was like, because I like pauses, right? Something to question my own beliefs, right? Because I never even thought about the way privilege and liberation kind of do, and when I think about what happens around me, kind of do get convoluted, like, but I'm like, wait, I do believe before I was fighting for privilege. Now it's like straight freedom. I don't care about none of this shit. Like I just want to be free all day, every day from all of it. And I want everybody else too, right? Like I don't even know what these privileges are, but I don't want them. The only privilege I do want is to be in charge of my time. So
and
yeah,
I think
that.
Go ahead.
No.
Oh, I was gonna say, when I think about privilege and I think about the discomfort that I'm seeing even now, right? As we sit with that, it's understanding that if you truly are looking for liberation, what does that look like when you spread that across evenly? Because indigenous people who live on reservations don't even have what we have in the ghettos of the urban cities. And that's completely erased, right? Like I think when I talk to a lot of my non-native Black counterparts about this kind of conversation, a lot of that, like, what does that even look like? Because the fear of being erased systemically has already happened to my people.
Mm. So Anaya says, liberation is being seen as equal. Privilege means you get to do that because you have or are this. Yeah. Yeah. There's like an exception for, I feel like privilege is more of like, yeah. You gotta be deserving of it. Something gotta qualify you. That's what it is. Something has to qualify you. And I think like for me, liberation is just like none of that shit. I don't know about it. Yeah.
I think we can go deeper on that point because privilege, in my opinion, is simply having the institutional power to do what you want to your group's benefit.
Yeah.
Right? If you have the institutional power to do what you want and perpetuate certain things, that's privilege. That's what we see when we think about white oppressorship, right? When we understand that, in my opinion, the reason why a lot of our white counterparts are in panic is because they see Black and brown folks gaining power while also using the same kind of power that they have used to oppress us. It's the same system. It's the exact same kind of system. We're really just awake enough to know, oh, okay, so this is how y'all did it. So we're going to do it this way too.
Yeah. But that goes back to the changing the guards though.
Absolutely. It is changing the guards. It's very myopic.
And that's what so this is what I often say to people, even when we talk about politics. We're all politicians, right? And we can get mad. We can be like, I'm not like this person. And that's why I giggle a lot about like our strong opinions about certain politicians. Because I do often see that same behavior within us. You know, within myself, within the people around me. And it may not express the same way, but that energy is there. Right? And if they had that opportunity, who knows what that energy might look like. The thing is about access sometimes, about power, about the rooms you're in, and how you can utilize your energy and your power. But nonetheless, right, would you take advantage if you was put in that position? Or not take advantage, but would you be influenced to be that way if you were put in that position? We see it with, you know, lawyers who take advantage, right, who do ethical things. We see it with doctors. We see it with different politicians. We see it with so many people we trusted for a long time, right? Like we start seeing these behaviors show up. And I think it goes back to even like the death of the vessels, right? Like now people are awakening to it. Before we used to say, I want to get in the system so I can break it down. I don't know if you ever said that, but I was that person who was like, I want to work in nonprofit. I want to be the voice for the people. And then I realized how problematic that was.
It is. And I think that like, I want to address this commenter.
I'm going to come
right?
back. Yeah, okay.
Like, no, they're scared that we will do what they do. We aren't oppressive. We are forgiving people. Hence why we always eye roll colonize. We share information, teach them out of their ways, and then we become enslaved. If you read the Pedagogy of the Oppressed, it talks about how the oppressed liberate the oppressors, right? But there is a very fine line between the oppressed adopting the exact same kinds of systems and wielding it against those who oppress them. Okay. When I think about this kind of logic and how we try to distance ourselves from the way that we engage in settler colonialism, as social workers, we understand that many of our systems are carceral systems. And when a lot of Black and brown and indigenous people enter these systems as helpers, we are forced to participate in a system against our own. And if you're having like dissonance, even thinking and sitting on that, I would invite you to reflect on that even deeper. I would invite you to reflect on that even deeper. Because in the reality, all of us have a proximity to settler colonialism. All of us have a colonized ideology that we're perpetuating. When we're thinking about colorism, when we're thinking about pigmentocracy, when we're thinking about elitism, when we're thinking about classism, when we're thinking about all of these structures that have been projected onto the Black and brown body and into the minds of us. And when we talk about liberating ourselves, but when we liberate ourselves and dehumanize other people because they do not fit a certain kind of aesthetic that we perceive, we always want to run to, we are not all a monolith, but then you meet someone who's not monolithic and then you get in your feelings. To me, that's problematic.
I don't know. I talked to you about, not, I don't know. I do know my position on this. I talked to
Mm-hmm.
you about this, and I think I might have said this on my page before too. I'm very big on, this is the reason why I left law.
Right, right,
Is because I got so depressed and I got so overwhelmed with how my clients were being treated, right? I
right.
realized very quickly that the court system was a very subjective place. Even
Yes.
as much as the law was there was always an exception.
Mm-hmm.
And there was always who can tell the best story. And for me, that's not true, right?
Right.
Like I can tell a great story. I can do it with the best of y'all. But like I don't want to do that. That's not who I am. And
Mm.
when I saw people cycling in and out of the court system that looked like me and looked like my neighbors and my family, that was just too much.
Right.
And for me, I felt like I was perpetuating the system. I was helping it keep going in that
Mm.
direction. So as much as it was scary as hell to leave, I decided to dip out because,
Right.
and you saw me too when I was in at the other legal place. I ended up leaving for the same reason because I realized even though in a holistic spaces, the same thing is happening because you have to play the game to get the money to stay in business, especially if you're a nonprofit, right? There's expectations attached to these finances. And I guess like too, like even to talk about that, thinking about that, and we talk about, this privilege and different there's levels to it. But you got
Mm-hmm.
to go into private practice. So
Yes.
can I just ask you what made you go into private practice after leaving grad school, after getting out of grad school?
Privilege. That's how. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be so transparent about my privilege. When I was working in corporate America, I saved about 25 grand because I knew when I went to grad school, I really couldn't work. So I worked part time and was living off of my savings. Then, when I went over straight out of grad school, I said, I really don't want to rejoin this kind of system. I don't want to further participate in this. So I went straight into my private practice. And what I did was I absolutely looked around and said, okay, what are the laws? That right there is another privilege of mine, right? It's having an academic privilege of knowledge. And I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to know how can I set this up legally, ethically, and did so. And being able to do that was a new form of liberation, right? Because I was able to do the certain kind of healing work that I know that Black and brown bodies need, particularly within mental health, that are not able to access these kind of services in a way that is healing. It's oftentimes more carceral. We saw it at our particular internship where we were meeting with our clients, but the resources were not there.
Mm-hmm.
The support was not there. And a lot of the people who were often there to quote unquote help these communities were oftentimes perpetuating lateral violence.
Yes.
And so one thing that I would say, and that I still continue to say to folks is, when it comes to liberation, we must always remember that the closer we get to Black liberation, the more non-Black people of color will be folded into the privileges of whiteness.
Mm.
That's the indoctrination process that continues to happen. When I have traveled to different countries, and it's predominantly a Black and brown country, who are the ones who are treated as if they are white? Those who are lighter, those whose phenotypic features are farther away, right, from Blackness. And so I think that we always have to understand nuance because nuance is so important in all of these kinds of conversations. And as we think about the conscious death of the vessel, it's happening right now. There are ideas that we have been holding on to that are being challenged, and the dissonance that we're feeling is a
Mm-hmm.
death. And we can choose to either sit in that and invite those thoughts and invite those new downloads, or we can say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to sit in my way of thinking.
Yeah. But even that, right, takes work, right? Because I mean, yes, but we know it takes work. But not only that, like people who are just experiencing it for the first time, right? This
Mm-hmm.
discomfort, right? Like, and it does usually trigger anger. Because I'm thinking about, right? I didn't know racial awakening was a thing. People, I found out during grad school. It's a thing, and it happened for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that feeling you get, like if you don't have tools to manage it, you don't know what to do with yourself. right? And that's when, like, you know, you lash out, whether that's fighting, whether that's being aggressive. You know, aggression is a little different to people who either you feel like is the enemy or you feel like it's the problem. Um,
That part.
yeah.
The shadow work is so important in these healing journeys. You know, when I look at colorism, particularly within Black and brown spaces, whether they're indigenous and native or not, just in general, and I see the responses to colorism coming from a place of anger, coming from a place of rage that manifests as dehumanization. That right there is not a liberating thought. That is a trauma reaction that is manifesting through your body, through your spirit, perpetuating the same kind of power that you wish you had to do unto others what has been done to you. And that's painful to think about, because then we have to then question and say, well, then is Eddie saying that we shouldn't be angry, that riots are not valid? Oh, no. Charlie, you know, because you've heard me say it in whole meetings at our past internship. The cities can burn. The system can collapse, and they will. But what happens after the rage? Then what? We have to heal. We have to figure out what that looks like for our bodies, for our communities, for our vessels, for our spirits. Because if we are constantly navigating our healing journeys through rage only, then we're not learning the other lessons that our shadows have to teach us. And being angry all the time is exhausting. That's why advocates burn out like this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so real. It's so real, and it's so true. And even talking about the shadow work, but the trauma that's caused from all this too, right? Like, because not even thinking about that, right? Whether you are aware of a traumatic experience or not. Like, I didn't know, like, growing up, all the traumatic shit that happened, and then later on you become an adult and everything is triggering you, right? Your nervous system can't seem to settle or stay in neutral long enough. Your hyperactive nervous system is always, you know, causing a stir for you or needing you to pause. And to think about all of that. And I think one thing we talked about was kind of like the family system within each of us, right? Like how we get fragmented, right? And that there we become, I don't want to say we separated, but in a way you kind of close off a section of you, right? You start dividing up, right? And that's where all those triggers tend to come from. So I was wondering, for you, as someone who does soul retrievals, right? Do you have any like idea of, or what would you say if someone was like starting off, right? Like on this journey, and they are just feeling like something don't feel right, but it's also like, what the fuck I don't know what else to do. Like, I don't feel comfortable here. This doesn't feel good for me, but how do you explore that, if anything? I mean, not to like make you now I'm asking you for advice. Look at me.
A lot of times with my clients, whenever they come to me and they're talking about some kind of emotional discomfort, one of the first questions I'll ask them is, when was the first time you stopped feeling safe in solitude? When was the first time you stopped being enchanted by stories? When was the first time you stopped singing or dancing? And they'll look at me and they'll say, what does that have to do with therapy? And as I tell them, stop and ask your inner child, reflect on that. And 9 times out of 10, they come up with the first traumatic response that happened in childhood, even as young as 3, that they can remember, either abandonment or rejection, invalidation, some kind of physical trauma. And from that moment, a piece of your soul gets fragmented and gets stuck there. And then you just continue living. And then let's say you hit another trauma. Another piece of your soul gets lost there. You keep living. And as you are going through life, while your body and your vessel is aging, your spirit and parts of it are left behind. So when we see people who try to self-medicate through sex, straight out of a breakup, it's because they don't understand intimacy of the self. They're trying to fill a void with physical pleasure of the flesh, to try and get over something that is emotional. And the one thing that is so important to understand about the void is that the void will never be filled. It's a black hole that just keeps on eating. So if your shadow of abandonment and your inner child is not healed and recalibrated and reintegrated into your spirit today, you will continue to do those same behaviors, have those same thoughts, and you will struggle with your own spiritual evolution. Because people don't change, they evolve. Change is not true. Change is something that is a lie.
Someone asked me that, like, people don't change, and I didn't argue with it. I just didn't really know how to take it, right? It was just like, okay, like, but God.
Yeah. And you know, when I tell people that people don't change, they evolve, they kind of stop and they're like, what do you mean? I've changed, I've grown. And I said, yeah. At the same time, whenever your shadows come up and you're triggered in a certain way that you haven't healed, you have opportunity for emotional relapse and mood relapse and behavioral relapse to a lower vibrational frequency. We always have potential to relapse. For me, my shadow of rage and anger is what was driving me for so long. And it got to a point where I was literally like fist fighting people on a train. No control, just traumatic reactions. Like someone would come too close to me and I would just knock them out because I was out of control and didn't know what was going on. And then when I started really doing my inner child work, my soul retrieval work, I started seeing, oh, so I'm acting out from this place. There is an old African proverb that says the child that is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. I was that child. I would cause destruction anywhere that I went because I would feel abandoned and rejected. But when I learned how to self-soothe, even with our viewers who are challenging me and my thoughts, and I love it. You know me, Charlie. I love to be challenged because I think that when we challenge each other, this is how we truly learn and grow, right? This is how we invite new seeds of thought into our vessel and into our spirit to say, I've never thought of it in that perspective or in that way. Let me meditate on this medicine. Because I always tell my clients, I am not the all-knowing. I am simply giving you spirit medicine for you to meditate with the creator, with your ancestors and with your guides and with the deities that work with you, for they will give you your truth.
You know what? Something else that came to me too was about what you're saying right now, right? Like about your role and how you show up. And something else that really always gets me is your integrity. And why I want to talk about this is because people, I see a couple people in the chat who are also in the helper profession. And one thing with you, you are in a private practice, right? I want to be very clear about this, right? And when you're in a private practice, right, there is no guaranteed money coming in, right? Like that is up to you to get these, right? Whether that's people recommending people to you, you going to events, whatever you got to do to get these clients coming in, that's what you got to do, right? But one thing about you though is that you're right, which is what my inner child be like. We good, but you don't play about like just coming into sessions and hanging out, right? Like you're not really. And I wanted to talk about that codependency title because I feel like one thing I'm starting to realize is there is levels to a lot of this stuff. Right? There's so many levels to it. And you can be talking about self-trust or confidence in one area and then get to a whole other area and have zero. So when I'm talking about codependency, right? Like this is a topic we often talk about when we talk about romantic relationships. But that could be happening in any situation you're in. And so I wanted to explore even that with you while we're here.
Therapeutic codependency is, I believe, one of the #1 unethical problems that healing professions have. And the reason why is that a lot of us don't understand, particularly when you're in private practice, but it gets worse when you introduce the nonprofit industrial complex. Okay. All of these big box therapy spaces that are now doing only 30-minute sessions. I saw a place that had 25-minute sessions. I was like, what are you even doing in 25 minutes? But apart from saying, hello, here's the assessment for today, and then you're going home. And the reason why I understand this as being a codependent relationship is that the client becomes attached to this gaslighting delusion that they are doing healing work, and the therapist or agency gets attached to the reality that they are dependent on you coming to pay them and enabling their delusion. So whenever I get new clients, the first thing that I ask them is, do you want to heal, or do you want to come here and get confirmation bias? And they're like, what does that mean? And I say, I am a kind therapist. I'm not a nice therapist. I believe in necessary harms. Sometimes you have to confront yourself and feel that hurt, even in that moment, to understand, do I really want to change, or do I want to stay in this cycle of madness? And if you want to stay in that cycle of madness, then I think that that's great. I can recommend you to a therapist who will enable that for you. But it's not me, because I don't believe in accepting your money knowing that you're not really doing any work.
Yeah. And even that's interesting, right? Because it's like the process can look different for everybody, right? And I guess that's more of like you using discernment, right? Knowing when, all right, no, we just play, like, you ain't ready for this, or like, we're just going in circles here, right? Like, you just coming to hang out. I'm your friend at this point, right? You just coming to talk about surface level things. Because I've also had, clients like that, especially when I was doing private therapy, like, that just stay at surface level, and it takes a while to get there. But something else you talked about was necessary harm. And we, so I want to preface this with, like, I believe that there's spectrums to everything. And I think that even when you're learning to be kind or nice or whatever practice you're implementing, there's spectrums to it. So Eddie, that I tend to either go super right or super left, and it takes a while for me to harmonize this middle part, but I eventually get there. And one of the things that I fear is causing harm, even though I know that I can't control that. So I know that I watched a video on your page with another therapist, and you both discussed that, right? Yes, love the idea of a nice and not kind therapist. Keep it real. Yeah.
But it's reversed. You're a kind therapist. You're not a nice therapist. Not a nice one. Yeah. Because Ted Bundy was very nice, but he was not kind. Yeah. And he was also a social worker.
I tell people I'm not nice. Because I feel like my niceness is more of just a people pleaser thing, so I'm not really into it.
Exactly. And that's really what it is understanding kindness. To be kind is to even understand that what I may say may hurt your feelings in this moment. And the intention behind it is not coming from a place of malice, though the impact may be hurtful. And we can talk about the impact. I tell a lot of my clients that this is a sacred space for you to heal, to confront, to challenge, even me. And what that looks like is different for everybody, but this is not a safe space because safety is subjective. This is a brave space. Confront yourself, confront me, confront your shadows, confront your trauma. But if we can get you to feel safe, even if it's just for 5 minutes, then that's a win.
Because safety is a rough thing, right? Because some people you have to, right? Because some people don't even feel safe in their bodies, right? So even trying to have that conversation, right, bringing that up, right? I would get nervous unless I knew that, because a lot of people do deal with different, like, physical harm or sexual trauma and different things, right? So I'm even, like, when I was doing therapy, that was one of the things I would be nervous about too, right? Because I don't want to be like, especially when I'm guiding meditations and I'm asking you to close your eyes and all these other things, like, I got to be, like, I think about all this stuff and how that your body can react to it, right? And so, like, that makes me nervous and I don't act. But I think what you're saying is really helpful, at least for my brain, to be like, harm might be caused, but there's a greater good, right? There might be a greater good, or, you know what I mean? Like, sometimes it got to be chaos before there's actually, like, a calm. So there's different levels. I don't know. I do know.
And you bring up something that's right, like thinking about complex sexual trauma. All of my clients have experienced sexual trauma in some way. I did not even seek this population. They just found me. And in a lot of the work that I do, because I do spiritually infused psychotherapy, after certain number of sessions, when they begin to trust me in the process and they begin to trust their process, I start doing soul retrieval therapeutic sessions. And that's when we start doing somatic work within the body to identify crystallized trauma that is still living there. Mm-hmm. And I can say, all of my clients who have experienced this, some of which are in this space, they understand how intense that is and how harmful it can feel in that moment, because you are literally challenging and sometimes reliving to a completely psychological manifestation of what you went through and then feeling it in your body all over again. And I have done sessions in very non-traditional spaces. I've done therapy by rivers with some clients simply because they wanted to do a cleansing ritual there. And when I tell you, I have seen some of these clients when we are literally moving that crystallized trauma from their pelvic area, from the sexual abuse, and I tell them to push, 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 and I'm moving that energy upward, and I tell them to scream, the sound of a little girl comes out. Their voice completely changes. And then come the tears. And then come the anger. It's, again, another death of a vessel, because you are no longer allowing the power of that person who violated your body to control you. And you are reclaiming your body. You are reclaiming your space within your physical self and re-inviting your inner child to now come with you, because you are going to be the person that they needed when you were their age that you didn't have. You're helping them grow up.
Yeah. But even talking about all these different things, as much as like I'm like talking about different things, I'm like, yo, they all go under that umbrella though.
Yes, yes.
They really do. Like all these things we're challenging, we're talking about, we're questioning.
Yes.
Right? This is like, will you survive? Will you survive truth? Right? Like these systems in place, these beliefs, these ideas, will it survive? Will it survive?
Absolutely. And, you know, I want to go back even a little bit to the earlier part of the live, right, when we were talking about privilege. Will you survive truth? Indigenous and native truth is the land that so many people occupy is not just ours. Colonizers are not just white folks anymore.
Right.
So when we speak our truth about our land, what does that bring up for you? How do you want to try to silence us to maintain your vessel of security? And let me tell you, anti-Blackness is so real in indigenous spaces. And I speak about this so heavily because there are Black, indigenous, and Black native, and I'm going to say it like this because people need to understand, racialized Black. Not like ancestry DNA Black, like racialized Black folks who are indigenous, who have always been here. But because of anti-Blackness in indigenous spaces, these people are not even recognized. They are literally looked at and said, oh, you're not indigenous, you're not native, why are you here? Are you kidding me? These are elders who have always been here. But then when we think about a lot of these conversations around land back, right, around sovereignty, around immigration, the people who are never invited to the table are those whose land you're occupying. And it's not just in the Americas, it's globally. When I think about the continent of Africa, another one of the richest, most beautiful land masses of resources. And who is colonizing Africa faster than the original ones? China. But no one on that continent is being centered who is indigenous, who has always been there. So we have to look at the mirror reflections of what it is that we are looking at. And when we start to be confronted with that truth, when we're uncomfortable, like, wait, I'm seeing somebody who's obviously not racialized Black, who is indigenous, who is native, but they're saying things that make me question the idea of what Black liberation from a non-native and non-indigenous context looks like. because it's true. We know that Black Africans had no choice when they came here. And now that you are here, does this mean that we want to say, okay, everybody got to go? Depends who you ask. I'm not someone who believes that Black Africans need to necessarily get out of here.
Yeah.
I do believe, though, that you have to reflect on your proximity to settler colonialism. Because a lot of the land that is being given back to our Black counterparts was taken from us. So if you're supporting land back, then why do you not support it for me and my people? That's privilege.
Yeah, I need to chew on that. Because I don't know. Until you said something about it, I have not heard about it. So.
It's complex and there's nuance, right? And that's the thing that I always tell people is there is nuance. We are not all monolithic. Unfortunately, many of our ancestors, some of them wanted to be free, whether it's a Black African context, right? When we're talking about plantations and slavery, or whether it's an indigenous and native context. Many of our ancestors did not want to be free, whether they had a choice or not. It was the same. Many of us did. But colonialism has created and infected so many of our thoughts. The same problems that we're seeing in mainstream societies happen in indigenous spaces too. The anti-Blackness, the homophobia, the anti-indigeneity even. The whitewashing, the queer phobia, the transphobia.
So, well, I know we're about to wrap up soon, but something else, like even that you talked about too, I don't even know if we have time to bring this up, but I did want to bring it up because it is a topic that I have talked to people within my circle about, like, you know, people that on my page about, is the white passing, right? Because I know that there was actually you recently did a video about it. I reposted it. So if someone's seen it, about white passing not being real.
It's not.
And I wanted to talk about it because, like, during social work school, this book, White Fragility, this concept, white fragility, kept coming up. And if it's anything that blows my mind is when we're just trying to, like, make something seem softer than what it is, right? And that's what I was getting when I kept hearing it. Because I'm like, why are y'all, just say what you mean, because now y'all got a concept and y'all running with it. Y'all running with it, and we're not getting nowhere. So can you tell us a little bit about your perspective of white passing? Because I have had this conversation before, but I don't have a strong belief in it either way, right? Like, I don't really.
So the reason why white passing does not exist is because it does not work in the reverse. If someone were to be Black passing, we would call that blackface, or we would call that blackfishing. If someone were to be indigenous or native passing, we would call them a pretendian. Okay? So when we understand that the whole concept of white passing is built on the debate of blood quantum, the one-drop rule and the reverse one-drop rule, and the privilege of opting in and out of an invisible minoritized identity, that never takes into consideration pigmentocracy or the indoctrination of certain groups who are racialized white despite their ethnic cultural identities into whiteness. That's why it's not real. There are different kinds of white people, just like there are different kinds of Black people. There are Black Asian people, but when they're seen on site, they are treated as such. In the Philippines, this is huge. The original indigenous Filipinos were Black. They look just like you, Charlie. Okay? And in the Philippines, literally, if you are not skin bleaching, you will not get a good job. There are, Black Japanese people. Look at Naomi Osaka. And Japan didn't even want to claim her as Japanese because her phenotype was not the white Asian model. Within Latin spaces, in a Latin context, we romanticize this idea of la raza, this propaganda that we are all African, indigenous, and white Spaniard. It's not true, because if that were the case, then why were Black Africans owned by white Spanish-speaking people? Until this day, why do we continue to perpetuate these exact same kinds of narratives and harms and lateral violences? You know, if you are a Latin person and you have your hair locked, the first thing that you're going to be told is, that's dirty, that's associated with Black people, that's bad, like you need to cut your hair, don't you come into my house?
Yeah. Depends. Yeah.
You know, I tell people that, again, when you want to use your quote unquote whiteness, because that's what it is whiteness, to opt into an identity for your benefit, but you and I, who have also been influenced by whiteness and European like ideology and culture, we've also had, at least in me, white ancestry, right? My great grandfather was blonde hair, blue eyed, white man from Spain. My grandmother, the same thing. Okay, my great grandmother is Mayan. She's Maya. Okay, and everybody else in that lineage follows that all the way back. But I cannot opt into whiteness, no matter how much I wanted to for privilege or for opportunity. However, when someone who is quote unquote white passing decides to use the blood quantum and the one drop rule to opt into Blackness or to opt into indigeneity for benefit, for opportunities, to speak on panels, to get jobs, to get work, but then they want to opt out when they don't feel safe. Oh, I don't want to talk about my Blackness today. I don't want to talk about my indigeneity today, so I'm not going to. Blackness and racialized Blackness and racialized indigeneity are constants. They're constants.
Yeah. So anytime I've ever heard about white passing, it was never in the it was always in the context of the person is white passing, right? Like, to try to explain to me what this person, right? After you tell me a story about what happened, you're trying to explain to me who this person is, right? People will be like, oh, but I don't know what their ethnicity is, but they're white passing, right? Or whatever they would say. So that's often how I would hear it. And so, like, even when you say, like, it's not real, and I think Naya up here, Nacho, yeah, she's like, it's real, it doesn't mean it's right, it's real. So when I hear it's real in the sense of, like, people do say, like, call people that, right? Like, you're white, or they're white passing, just to explain to me what this person looks like.
They're white. They're a white Latin person. They're a white Asian person.
Oh, right, because you broke down race.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is you have to understand the difference between race, ethnicity, and nationality.
Yeah.
And let me tell you something. Again, when we talked about the argument in the reverse, I'm an Afro descendant. I have Black people in my family, but I'm not racialized Black.
Right.
If I enter a space with you or any of my Black counterparts who are closest to the proximity of Blackness, who is going to be treated better? Me.
Yeah.
But if I were to perpetuate anti-Blackness and then say, oh no, but I'm Black, and I already see it in your face, Charlie.
Yeah.
Exactly. Case, point, period. So we have to hold ourselves accountable that when we understand that you can be multiple things at once, identity is complex.
Yeah. But you also helped me understand erasing through that concept, right? Because I didn't really. So the thing with me is, like, when I think about concepts, I have to feel them in my body. So sometimes you have to say a couple of words to me for me to feel what that, so I can connect it. And so when you was talking about erasing, at first I wasn't really getting it, but then when you gave me the example, I felt it, like, hard.
Yes.
Right. That discomfort. Like, no, this is not okay. Kind of energy, which I didn't have. I don't know about not okay, but it, like, stopped me.
Right. And I mean, I will say this, because a lot of people who struggle with this idea, all you have to do is look at reality TV. Why is it that every Latin or indigenous person that you see in all of these reality shows, Real Housewives of blank, except Atlanta.
Yeah.
Right? Or like Bling Empire, all white Asian people. If you like Love is Blind, the first Latin person who was Mexican on Love and Blind had blue eyes and was white. But they parade and they tout, quote unquote, diverse people, but Within your homelands, you are treated as the white model and the white standard. But when you come to the United States, you understand for the first time that whiteness is also stratified. Right? According to white supremacy ideology, a WASP, or a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, is the top of the barrel, the Aryan, supreme, pure white. But that didn't last long. They needed to maintain power. So what did they do? We're going to indoctrinate certain people into this privilege. When Italians and Irish people and white Jewish folk first came here, they were not seen as white. But in order to maintain numerical majority, privileges were extended out. There is a book called The Birth Dearth. Write it down. The book is called The Birth Dearth, okay? And this book examines policy through the lens of trying to maintain white dominance. We saw this just with the flipping of Roe v. Wade. The people who get the most abortions are white women. And what was the Republican response when Roe v. Wade was flipped? This is a win for white life. Because you are now being able to extend your power to maintain numerical majority. And I know that when we talk about, you know, the Jewish diasporic conversation, it's a very touchy subject. A lot of people never want to touch that, but I will. I don't have a problem with that. Because when we talk about Zionism and seeing how Zionism was built on a white conservative ideology, that's why we're seeing what's happening in Palestine. Because there are Palestinian Jews who are black and brown, but they are not given the same privileges as their white counterparts who live in Israel. Not to mention, a lot of people talk about Israel, but they don't want to talk about the black Ethiopian Jews. Did you see, if anybody saw that article about Israel accepts however many thousands of black Ethiopian Jews? Everyone's like, oh, great, they're not anti-black. Yeah, but y'all didn't see the article about when they were basically sterilizing them? They sterilized those women. We have to understand this, and we have to be congruent in our advocacy. We have to be congruent in our ideological processes. And that's hard because as we continue to get new perspectives, even those who challenge us. I'm somebody who likes to think about liberation and everything from seeing and understanding the argument of those who oppose me. Because when I can understand your way of thinking, I'm able to come back to myself and say, does this person have a point? And if they do have a point, what is their point rooted in? Is it rooted solely in racism and anti-blackness? Most likely. Okay. Then what is the bigger picture there? It's fear. And you know, I don't know your name, but you know, you've been so active in the comments, and I love that. But understanding the fear, right? Like understanding white fear. The fear that we will do to them what they have done to us. And when I think about that fear, the reaction is because the institutions that they have used against us are the institutions that we are gaining power in. And when we think about history, right, understanding the formation of policing, right? It was through slave policing, right? Policing the slaves. But before that happened, there was the Battle of Beacon's Rebellion. And that was when there were slaves and poor whites who revolted against their rich plantation masters. And what happened was the system said, oh no, this can't happen. Let's give these poor whites guns and some privileges to police these individuals so that we can maintain power and sever that alliance.
So I got distracted by Naya's question. Where are we gaining power? I think that was from a comment when you were talking. Naya, is this in response to something Eddie just said? I'm assuming that's what it is in response.
When I think about power, I like to think about power in every sense of visibility, of every sense of institutional progression, of every sense of our ability to have joy. Black and brown joy is revolutionary resistance. That is powerful.
Yes, that.
Okay. The fact that people are being held accountable, I think the problem that when I see this question is you're having problems managing your expectations. Because the expectation for our generation, and this is why millennials are bitter, jaded, and burned out. Because we've been, okay,
I exit out.
okay, we've been doing so much work, but we're not seeing the instant gratification. We're not seeing the instant gratification, and that gets us upset. We have to understand that all the work that we're doing now are seeds and bricks for the next generation. We're not gonna see these privileges. We're gonna die, and they're gonna go and be moved past forward.
Yeah.
So again, but when I think about power, just that beach in California being given back to its black owners is power.
Yeah.
But I go further to say again, who owned that beach before them? Indigenous people. We are still disempowered. So we have to see the spectrum of all of these things and understand all of that nuance.
That's the thing. I feel like a lot of times I don't like get involved in these heated debates. I'm like, there's so many layers to this. Like,
there's layers.
Do we have the patience to have that conversation? Because it's not just a one thing. It's like layers on top of layers, and you got distract here, distract there. Also,
but hold on, I want to say this because I don't want my words to be minced because this is going to be pushed in public. I'm not telling black people to wait. Let's keep it a buck right there. I'm not telling black people to wait. I'm saying be congruent. Be consistent. Fight with us. Fight with indigenous people. Fight with native people. Because we are completely in the shadows. Completely in the shadows. On the own land masses that we inhabited forever. Be congruent. Because if we're talking about power, right? If we're talking about all of that liberation, what I envision is a world in which these difficult conversations about the nuance that we're debating over doesn't even have to happen. But we have to hold each other accountable. I have been called Pocahontas, which is such a derogatory slur for indigenous people by more of my black counterparts than white ones.
All right, so let me read these out loud. Well, I feel like if you watch the replay, you'll see it, right? Do these stay on?
You'll see it.
Stay on, right? Okay.
You'll see it. I think so. And again, Sky, you're right. Black folks do fight alongside of everybody. This is true. Most people don't fight along the sides of black folks. That is also true. But when I'm thinking about the congruence, I'm thinking about the wins that are happening institutionally, like land back for y'all, but we don't have sovereignty on our own land. Because a lot of land back movement for indigenous people means all of the land. And are you ready to battle with that feeling of what does my life look like if I gave indigenous people the power over their entire landmass?
But so that is a thing I've noticed in like a lot of policies and politics and just conversations I've been a part of, right? Like everybody else is also afraid of how things affect them. And we see it a lot in politics and policies and the spaces, right? Like people are concerned about how things are affecting them. I'm willing to give you but so much if it's going to take away from my power. And I'm not saying like that's right, but like a lot of times that's what goes down. That's why I think it's interesting, even when you know, I have a thing about, is it DEI? DEI, right? You know, I have like, about DEI and like putting black and brown people in those spaces just to kind of like use them as your face, right? As the face of, we're trying to do something right. And in reality, I know that's not what's happening, right? But you don't want to deal with the consequences of what your system is creating constantly, the harm that's being done, right? So you're going to say, oh, I'm trying to fix it, or we working on it. But really, it's just smoke and mirrors. I feel like that happens a lot. It happens a lot with policies. That's why I'm like, yo, the way we be fighting, like, get into these policy rooms,
Yes.
writing, all that stuff. Like, that's where it is, because they then want to be like, oh, let's interpret it. But the people that's making these policies, they only going to say yes, but for so much, because they also want to keep their power. Even Black and brown people in those rooms.
Yes, they want to keep their power.
Yeah. It's like, we need to recognize that too.
Absolutely. And again, the response here, we have no land. Where will we go? White people say the exact same argument. It's the same thing. But what does that look like? We have to define what that envision is.
That's what I'm curious about too.
And again, I'm not saying I have all the answers, because I can't speak for everybody. I won't. I'll speak for my thoughts, for my processes, for all of these things. But I think that, again, when we talk about giving lands back, if you are fighting for ownership of land that was once owned by Black folks, if you're not fighting for indigenous people getting sovereignty on their land, on their continent, that's not congruent. I'm sorry, I'm calling that out. That's not congruent. It's not congruent.
So we were dragged here? Yeah.
Hard conversations.
It is, and it's a lot to unpack here. And we're also, as much as we love you guys, we are wrapping up. Love y'all.
Yes, I love everyone. I love everyone.
I'm working on not using guys. That's why I heard myself say guys, and I was like, y'all, hold on. I don't know. I could say the same thing about indigenous people to Black folk in terms of being discriminated against and disrespected. So that feels more divisive than anything. And the next one is they can go back to Europe where they came from. I don't know where my ancestors came from. Yeah. I
think that, again, a lot of the dissonance here, because there's a lot of dissonance happening here, that this is what should be meditated on. This is what could be thought about. Because again, I think we need to be congruent. We have to be consistent in what we're advocating for.
See, that's so interesting to me. I really need to sit with that, because I am very much like, sometimes like this, like, too big is too much. I need to be like this. So I don't know what that means for me. So interesting.
And again, being dragged here is a reality. Yeah, Black Africans were dragged here. However, you're still on stolen land. And you being able to, at one point, own and buy land that was stolen from indigenous people is capital power. And you being able to hold that and say, all right, we got that back, we're good over here. But indigenous people are like, that wasn't even yours to begin with. Whether you were dragged here or not, it wasn't yours to begin with. And I think that's the dissonance. And again, for me, I'm not, it doesn't add up. It doesn't, because the argument does not add up. It is a straw man argument. In my opinion, and like I said, I speak for myself, I see Black and brown folks being here because we're here. That's me. I believe that if somebody's got to go, it's those who invaded the shores, okay, by will, okay, not force, right? But I think that we really have to sit with that dissonance and understanding that if we are fighting for getting land back to its rightful owners, the owners are not those who were able to purchase the land because of certain kinds of liberation methods that happened that were needed. The owners of the land are those who were here before the ships came. Not just in the United States, but in Canada, in South America, in all these countries, because, or rather, in all these points, because the same thing happened. The slave trade happened.
But this is so interesting, because once you start that conversation, right, you go down even further and further, because even as we're talking about, right, the buying the land, and the land, first of all, it ain't yours to be selling, right? So you selling something that ain't even yours to be selling, right? But then we go into this thing of like, it reminds me of the law here in the United States where it's all called unclean hands, right? Like you can't come to court fighting and arguing when you ain't got no clean hands, right? And if you buying land that you know is stolen, right? It just turns into this whole, my brain is starting to like think like, what?
But I think this is good. And I think this is where it starts, right? Like the dissonance that we're all feeling. Because for me, I've had these thoughts, not just in my perspective, but in the reverse. Where do people go? At the same time, though, I think this is where we have to extend our argument to liberating the continent of Africa. That's what we have to start talking about, liberating the continent of Africa from the colonial powers that hold it. Because there are African advocates talking about land back, give it back to us, particularly in South Africa. And I think that we're talking about this through a, again, United States context.
Me for sure, yeah.
Okay? We have to broaden all of this to a bigger perspective that the continent of Africa is equally being robbed by multiple governments all over the place. And so when I talk about land back, I don't just talk about land back here in the Americas. I talk about land back in Africa. I talk about land back for any person who experienced colonial violence. And there are, quote unquote, governmental, like return to the land movements. We saw this with Ghana. They had a whole campaign. If you are a Black descendant of Africa, however you identify, we welcome you. We will give you money to move here to start your own life outside of the Americas because of colonial violence you were experiencing there. But if you didn't know about that, then you know that, okay, you didn't know. But then the question then comes to this. Again, we're talking about migration and immigration. Do I move somewhere, even if it is my homeland, and uproot the only thing that I know to start somewhere new? Do I uproot that? And I think that's where a lot of the discomfort for like all of us go. Because again, I will even say, right, the Maya people are from Guatemala, from the South Americas. And even when I talk about land back, I'm here on land that isn't even necessarily my indigenous civilization's land. But I understand that if I'm speaking about land back, I want my land back in Guatemala so that I could go there and I could have the opportunity to move in these spaces freely. And I think that that's what we all necessarily want, right? Is the liberation to move through our lands, our homelands, our lands that feel like home, right? Going through and being able to find that peace wherever that looks like. But I think that, again, if we're talking about land back and people who owned it because they were able to get capital, that's not land back.
I wanted to come back around to that just so I can kind of summarize it for my own self, right? You can tell me if I'm hearing it correctly too. And in case anybody else needs that too. Because what you were just talking about is like, hey, yeah, I want my land back too, but I won't just fight for my land. I want to fight for everybody who need their land back. So that's what you're saying. That's what I'm hearing.
Right. And I think here, like again, because, I got to go. We got to wrap up. But when I'm seeing, these comments here, I validate them because these are true feelings. I do. And at the same time, all I ask is that you sit with that dissonance, because this is dissonance. This is dissonance. That if you're fighting for the land of ownership back as a Black non-native person or non-indigenous person, but you're not fighting for land back for the indigenous people who have been here forever, and the arguments that you're using are rooted in settler colonialism, because that's exactly what they are. Understanding the nuance in there is also important. Always nuance.
Yeah, there was so much we could have talked about, because even talking about that, right, where I talk about my own, what did I call it, prejudices and stuff that I, I kind of work apart. All right, so we are going to wrap up. I know this conversation was delicious, and we kind of was like, So all the things got done, and we are talking about vessel on a bigger level than just our bodies. Yes, we are occupying these, but it goes even further than that. But we are going to wrap up here. Eddie talks about all the things that we talked about here on their page, so you can go clap for Bravo. Is that where your daily posts are?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
Clap
my
for
main
Bravo.
page. Yeah.
Yes. Does lives, does interviews, does a couple of quick minutes in the morning sometimes. Great, different things for you to marinate on. And I think that that's why, you know, I appreciate you, because you always give me something to think about, right? And to pause me. And I love it. My Gemini rising loves it. She does. So
We share that. We
appreciate
share
you.
the Gemini
Oh, yes,
rising.
yes, we do. But yeah, so I appreciate you so much. And yes, I really definitely recommend checking out their services if you resonated with the energy, for sure. It's on their page as well. The link is there, and just follow their page. I definitely just recommend that. That way you just stay in the know, and you can just journey with them as they expand their own conscious awareness as well, and just, you know, whatever we're processing through. Because we didn't even
Yeah.
talk about your gratitude practice. That's a whole
It's
different
all
thing.
right.
So you gotta go to their page. Period.
There's so much. And again, I want to thank all of the people who viewed, who challenged me in this, because again, this is how we grow. This is how we learn. You challenge me, I challenge you, we challenge each other, and then we sit with those thoughts and say, is my shadow of invalidation coming up right now? Do I feel like I'm not being heard? And if I'm not being heard, is that rooted in my inner child responding? Because for the first time, when was the first time that I felt silenced? I am so happy for the delicious challenges in here, because I think that, again, none of us have the concrete answer. But what I hope is that, and Tupac said it best, that the words that we say will ignite the minds of the future generations who's going to make the change. Because I know I don't have the answer, and I can say that humbly. I don't have the answer to land back. And I also examine my proximity to settler colonialism as to why I can't have the answer. Because there are indigenous people who grew up in indigenous communities on sovereign reservations, and that's not my experience. So I never speak to have that. What I do speak to is my experience as a Maya descendant with an immigrant experience, who experienced colonial violence in a racialized indigenous body, who experienced cultural violence and cultural genocide in an indigenous context. And as I reconnect in these kind of ways, and as we all reconnect in whatever ways that we do, right? A lot of people are trying to find their root. It's just, I think we all have to understand reconnecting humbly, because all of the liberation conversations that we have do not take into consideration settler colonialism, except for those that come from an indigenous context. And every single time indigenous people talk about that, we are met with, well, where will we go? What about us? What will we do? But we have to create that. We have to create that vision.
Ooh, this talks to so much of my beliefs. I'm gonna dissect this one day. But yes, don't want to hold it anymore. Thank you so much for all of this. Thank you
Thank
everyone
you.
for just riding with us, talking all the things. I appreciate you, and yeah, Eddie, thank you.
You're
And I will
welcome.
see you soon. Trust me.
Yes, we got so much work to do.
Yes, I'm doing one. So love you all. Thank you. I will see you all soon. And actually, there's a Truth Talk with Charliie on Sunday. More details to come. So I'll see you all then. Bye.
Bye.
Buenas noches.